Ladies and gentlemen, like the song says, all Trump does is win, 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 no matter what. The man cannot stop winning. And when you watch my live stream every day around this time, and I'm going to be doing different live streams as well, numerous live streams throughout the day next month and beyond. But every day we'll have a live stream on H.A. Goodman at around 9 to 10 to 11 p.m. Eastern. And it's going to be a celebration. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. If you want to celebrate every single day, if you want to feel good after having survived 8 years of the most apoplectic, irrational, nonsensical, venomous meltdown from the morally superior liberal Democrats among us, the same people who will want to disown friends and family because they lost in politics or because years back you chose Trump, who was the anti-endless military intervention option. It was a moral imperative. And hit subscribe right now to vote for Trump. He is against never-ending military conflict. We had record low poverty with Trump. We had record highs in household median income. And now the same Democrats who benefited financially and economically from Trump, and we didn't have the invasions, we didn't have the terrible foreign policy, we didn't have double mortgage rates under Trump. Mortgage rates have doubled. If you're a morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat, why wouldn't you love Trump? Mortgage rates doubled under Biden and Harris. Then the same Democrats say, oh, we can't buy a home. Well, you're picking people who double the mortgage rates because inflation was so out of control, they had to hike up interest rates through the roof. Then they said we took care of interest rates as they flooded the country full of strategic petroleum reserves. But here, NBC News, and you'll hear the legal analysis in a second. Judge agrees to dismiss Donald Trump's interference case. CNN special counsel Jack Smith drops subversion and classified documents cases. Then you have an Atlantic article which is amusing. Donald Trump got away with it. BBC, judge dismisses Jack Smith's case against Trump. Why do you think this happened? Because he won the presidency? They're dismissing the cases, and the New York case has essentially been dropped. The conviction has essentially been overturned, like I said it would be. I told you Trump would win for 4 years. I told you every single attempt to imprison Trump would not work, and that all of these would be overturned or the cases would be dropped. Hit subscribe. Paul Bartlett, thank you. To my super chat, thank you. I told you this for years, ladies and gentlemen, and almost everything that I have been telling you is taking place. Number one, and you'll get to the legal analysis in a second from Fox and others, but number one, none of these cases, none of them had any evidence. The indictments were written as if an MSNBC producer wrote them. And by the way, I think that Elon Musk will purchase MSNBC probably for about $8 billion. I'll tell you how I got to that number. That's purely speculation. I have no inside knowledge. It's purely speculation and purely, projection, or what I'm projecting or speculating or what I'm predicting or thinking about. But he'll probably turn the network more conservative or allow a whole bunch of voices, which eventually will lean towards a conservative viewpoint. When you allow discussion, you're generally going to get a more conservative viewpoint on things. When you silence speech, that's the only way to prop up a great many liberal viewpoints. We've seen that before. It hasn't worked. But number one, and you'll get to the analysis in a second, ladies and gentlemen. Number one, not a shred of evidence linked Trump to any criminal activity that day in January. Nothing. The Federal Bureau of Investigation investigated immediately. They said that Trump did not commit any crimes, or he was not part of any plot to overthrow or rebel against the United States government. You would have to be a complete and utter imbecile to think that. Number two, the immunity victory within the Supreme Court, we'll get to that also, I said would take place. The immunity victory told Jack Smith and the special counsel, Biden special counsel against Trump, that you cannot imprison a president based on what he said in a speech. I don't care if you think it's lies. Biden was lying for 3 weeks straight when he said he would stay in the presidential contest. All he did was lie, and then he was forced out. That's a grandiose lie right there. Do you imprison Biden because he lied? And how many presidents have lied about military conflict that endangered the lives of Americans and others? We have American soldiers, men and women, who lost limbs, who lost their lives, based on, oftentimes, lies from presidents. Do you then imprison the presidents? So they said, well, Trump, he lied. You know what? Most Americans agree with at least part of what Trump was saying 4 years ago. But anyway, so there wasn't a shred of evidence. The immunity victory gave Trump a huge victory over the special counsel. They actually managed to make the office of the presidency, the executive branch, stronger. So everything Democrats did backfired. None of it worked out. But this is huge. Now you have Matt Gaetz as part of a future special counsel, with Pam Bondi as Attorney General, John Ratcliffe as a Central Intelligence Director, the ODNI Director is Tulsi Gabbard. We'll have a new Federal Bureau of Investigation Director. And it's like, it's amazing. It's amazing. But let's get started. Hit subscribe to this channel. Let's get started. This is absolutely huge, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely huge.
Counsel Jack Smith asking the judge to dismiss Trump's D.C. case. I want to bring in Congressman Darrell Issa on this. Great to have you on the program, sir. Always appreciate your insight. 4 felony charges here. This was with respect to Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. It resulted in what we saw.
Give up, and they want to know if they could, shoot him after he's in the grave 20 years from now, if necessary. The rest are using the common sense. The Supreme Court has spoken loud and clear that his actions as president are not open to that in the past or in the future. You understand, Smith is only dismissing that which he was going to lose if he went to court with anyway.
Yeah, that's the big point, Congressman. You took the words right out of my mouth. I mean, the Supreme Court basically said to him, lose the case. I mean, you're be done with the case. Dismiss the case. You're going to lose it. We've made the ruling on this. And then he tried to change it a little bit so he could sort of, sneak it in under the door or something. Obviously, that was not going to work. So to me, is this a question of, look, the law has finally hit him, or is it the case that he has just seen definitively through what happened in the election? America has said, stop it with all this lawfare, put it to rest. We've elected our president.
I think he wants to get some amount of his own credibility back by acting like he's actually following the law. Mm-hmm. But he didn't follow the law. He abused the law. This series of events over 4 years is the reason that the House of Representatives has a committee on the weaponization of government. And that committee is headed by Jim Jordan, is not going away. We're going to have to continue to dig deep into the weaponization. Even at the State Department, we're going to have to dig into it, where, they're in mourning because their candidate didn't win.
Yeah.
Do you think there's enough digging into that where then these cases are done? Or should Trump be awaiting 2028 when he's no longer the sitting president for these cases to then come back to him?
Well, Trump, his attorney general, and the Congress all have a requirement, and that is over the next 4 years to end once and for all the ability of the federal or even local governments to weaponize. Not to dig deep into the Constitution, but the Constitution specifically had a clause in it that said that states and cities could not arrest members of Congress as they transited to and from New York and then Washington, D.C. Mm. Well, they put that in because they knew that kind of misconduct could happen if Virginia didn't like the way Georgia was going to vote. Hmm. That is true today. The only difference is we don't have a specific written part of the Constitution that makes it clear that the president enjoys those same things, that his official conduct, which includes when he opines on something or decides that something's wrong and says so.
The Supreme Court ruled that President Trump, any president, has the right to give you his viewpoint, especially on a very controversial topic. If you want to say, well, Trump lied, and that lie led to a terrible catastrophe, well, prove it. There's nothing he said. He didn't tell anyone to commit a crime. He used the words peaceful and patriotic. So they didn't even indict him on an actual, trying to foment a rebellion. The indictment is written, all of these indictments were written by, Atlantic journalists or MSNBC or CNN producers. They assume the worst. These are the same people that look at Hunter's laptop and say there's no link to Joe when there's actually emails saying that Joe is the big man and he's part of the business deals, and that's of course why there's alleged bribery and graft within that laptop. But there's if when Democrats are caught with their pants down, literally, also not just figuratively, they say, oh, you can't prove it. It's a causation. Correlation is not causation. And whether they have a foundation or they have a laptop or secret servers, they give you the most absurd excuses. It's about yoga. And the entire American press just believes it. With Trump, there's no stone unturned, and they make absurd leaps of logic. There's only investigative journalism when it comes to Trump. Zero investigative journalism when it comes to Biden's classified data breaches or Hillary Clinton's servers with top secret intelligence on them. It's literally impossible from a cybersecurity perspective to transfer top secret intelligence onto servers. But there's nothing that Trump said that day. He did not tell anyone to commit a crime. And what they tried to do is they said, well, you got all these Trumpers upset. And Lord knows, when the Trumpers get upset, they can't control themselves. They're like diabolical monsters. That's essentially what Democrats have been trying to tell the American public. Nobody bought it, especially when Tucker Carlson found footage and people were let into the building. So there were a lot of questions that day. If you listen to Vivek Ramaswamy and others, there's a lot more questions that Democrats don't want answered. That's why they withheld exculpatory evidence.
It doesn't open him up to civil suits. It doesn't open him up to criminal suits. We didn't do it to Joe Biden. We didn't do it to Jack Kennedy. We didn't do it in the past. They've done it now, and we're not going to let them do it after President Trump leaves office.
All right, Congressman, stay with us. We're going to come back to you in just a moment. We just want to get a little bit more from Lydia Hu on this.
Hi, everyone. Really great to be with you guys on this really big news. We're just getting this in, and we're getting reaction from, Trump's transition team as well. This is coming from Stephen Chung, who's a Trump spokesperson, and also the incoming White House communications director, who is saying, quote, the American people re-elected President Trump with an overwhelming mandate to make America great again. Today's decision by the DOJ ends the unconstitutional federal cases against President Trump. And when I read those first couple of lines, it made me really reflect on this moment and the fact that these cases would likely not be dismissed had President Trump not just won that election, the incredible victory that was, for the people that support the president, but also for himself.
And that's a huge problem with politics today. There are, liberal Democrats who are extremely intelligent, academics, professors, and they know that the legal attempt against Trump was retribution, venom. They know that they convince themselves of things that otherwise, if they were not Democrats, they would never agree to, adhering to. They would never believe that an incoming Democrat was an operative of the Kremlin. They would never believe that a speech from Chuck Schumer compelled a person from across the country to try to end Kavanaugh's life. With the Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh had somebody who tried to end his life. And that was right after a speech that where essentially Chuck Schumer threatened the Supreme Court. He said, "You won't know the whirlwind that you reap," something along those lines. "You have no idea the whirlwind that you'll eventually, and he used words like coming after and you and all that stuff. So nobody's linking Chuck Schumer's speech, and nobody's linking numerous speeches from Democrats to endless property damage, billions of dollars in property damage that summer 4 years ago. And I agree with why people peacefully demonstrated. But Trump had to win in a decisive, huge victory for these overtly partisan attempts at imprisoning him to just drop. The reason, if he was guilty, none of these things would go away. That's my point. That's my long-winded point. If he was guilty, and this is, if you happen to be a liberal Democrat stumbling upon this channel, I'm going to say this very slowly so you can understand. If Trump was guilty, none of these cases would be dropped. The reason they were dropped is not because Trump is so powerful and he's president now and special counsel Jack Smith will eventually be replaced by Matt Gaetz. The reason is that he wasn't guilty of anything. The indictments were written with very absurd leaps of logic. He deliberately stole classified data. He has the power to declassify. The Supreme Court has made numerous rulings. Navy versus Egan is one. And then you have the immunity victory. Oh, he's performed a speech. Well, but he's allowed to perform a speech. He's not liable for any criminal activity from people he doesn't know. Well, he got them upset, and Trumpers, and this and this. Like, well, that's not the law, and that's not, you can't indict Trump on that. And also, there were a lot of very bizarre things that took place. Just ask Vivek Ramaswamy. It's very sad we still can't talk about it in the open. Well, I mean, we can, but it's sad that there are repercussions for speculating on, how corrupt Democrats and government and media can be. But anyway, let's continue. None of these cases had a shred of evidence. That's why they're dropped. If there was any evidence at all, they wouldn't all be dismantled before our very eyes.
Very likely would have still been facing these federal cases. So what this leaves with this now, Judge Chutkan in the D.C. Circuit Court, the D.C. District Court, will now have to approve the dismissal of this case. And then we'll still have to wait to see what happens with the federal case. That's the documents case that's still unfolding. We're hearing from our colleagues over on the Fox News channel that we do expect a similar motion to be made to dismiss that case as well, which then is just the chipping away of the lawfare. And of course, then what leaves us with is the Manhattan case, this New York City case, which we're still waiting to see how Judge Merchan is going to deal with that.
How many more stays can he take? But
None of the cases. The New York conviction was based on misdemeanors elevated to felonies because of an imaginary federal crime that the state of New York unilaterally decided. So if it went to the Supreme Court, which it could very well go, the Supreme Court will side with Trump yet again. The Supreme Court sided with Trump on the January defendants. The Supreme Court sided with Trump on the immunity question. The Supreme Court sided with Trump overturning the Colorado ban. All of these cases are being dropped. The New York conviction, where the rule of law, where this was about the rule of law, everyone is laughing at this. Everyone knows that what Democrats did is use state prosecutors in conjunction and coordination, likely with federal government DOJ officials, to try to imprison their direct political rivals. It didn't work. But in New York, I thought he was a felon. He's a convicted felon. Nobody believed that. That's the thing. Like, if you're this morally superior liberal Democrat who isn't going to Thanksgiving because your family member voted for Trump, your family member had the audacity to vote for for lower inflation. Oh my God. And an end to invasions and endless wars. Oh my God. Oh, immoral. You have wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrats who are disowning friends and family because they're the protagonists in their own delusional fantasy world. I'm standing up for what's right. You mean you want high inflation? No, Trump's an authoritarian. Oh, you mean all the cases that were brought against him were dropped because there was not a shred of evidence? Blah. He won the popular vote with all of media against him. You couldn't even get one ticket to be sold to a movie if every single publication said the movie was terrible, horrible, terrible. Hollywood lives off of public relations. Democrats and never-Trumpers live off of public relations. Matt Gaetz doesn't. Trump doesn't. Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't. Rand Paul doesn't. You don't. These people don't need. If you're a Trump Republican and you stand on principle, which, by the way, if you stand on principle as a Trump Republican, the Democratic partisans don't have the same principles. They don't view national security like if you don't like Trump, you don't view the border as a national security issue. You don't view foreign policy as a huge like the most important issue for you. That's just, I'm not being, rude or belligerent or mean-spirited. Democrats do not see the same things to be national security issues as Republicans. To a lot of Democrats, if you allowed 50 million people, 60 million people into the country, they'd be no problem. Just not in their home, not in their city, not in Martha's Vineyard. But they don't view it. They don't even see they don't even admit atrocities are taking place at the Southern Geographic region of our country. They don't even know. If there's not a picture of AOC crying into a chain link fence, they don't even care about it. It's not even an issue. Let's continue.
Trump's former AG, Bill Barr, is saying all prosecutors should dismiss their cases against the president-elect. Listen.
I think the president really is going to have any legal problems going forward. These cases are not going to go forward, neither the federal cases nor the state cases against the president. So I think it's really a question of how these governments, the federal government, the Justice Department, is going to dismount from the limb it's gotten itself out on.
Katie Cherkasky is a constitutional law attorney, former federal prosecutor, joins me now. Chanley did a really good synopsis of what's going on. Let's start with the Fed cases. We have documents. We have election interference. Chanley mentioned that DOJ longstanding policy, a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. That phrase, wind down Jack Smith's case. Describe what a wind down of Jack Smith's cases looks like.
Well, I think big picture here, if you haven't been able to convict someone in the court of public opinion, there's really no legitimate way you can convict them in a court of law. And every prosecutor has discretion about what cases they bring forward. These cases, we've called them lawfare, and that's because they're cases that have stretched the bounds of any prior precedent. They're never before seen interpretations of criminal law. So in terms of winding down these cases, they essentially can dismiss them really at any time, or obviously when Donald Trump takes office, he will dismiss the cases and summarily fire Jack Smith. So there's many different ways that the cases could end. They're not practically going to trial anytime soon, even if Trump had lost. But at this point, I do agree that they need to be concluded.
So the takeaway on the Fed cases, they're done, finito, over. Then there is the New York State Court case. All focus now goes there. This is the Stormy Daniels case. He's got sentencing less than 3 weeks from now. What happens there?
Well, that case also is complicated because of the Supreme Court's ruling regarding immunity. So
the sentencing has been postponed indefinitely, which means that the case was dropped, but the Supreme Court not only gave immunity, the New York verdict is based on a federal crime. The federal government did not level a charge at Trump. So it's the state court it's unconstitutional. It's an unconstitutional guilty verdict.
essentially, there is sentencing scheduled, but before that can even proceed, Judge Merchan is expected to rule on whether that case actually is tainted by the immunity ruling, meaning that they allowed in inadmissible evidence and that the case would essentially have to be reversed and go back to trial, or ultimately go back up to the Supreme Court to determine whether the immunity ruling impacted it. So for all intents and purposes, again, that case could also be dismissed.
but it doesn't have to be. If there is any adverse ruling to President Trump, it's immediately appealable, meaning that if Judge Merchan says the immunity case does not end that case summarily, that would be essentially appealed anyway. And then, of course, I guess he could sentence him at some point to jail time. Again, something that would be immediately appealable and probably stayed pending a decision by the higher court. So for all practical purposes, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. The question is how far these people will continue to push these cases.
There's also the logic of all this. You find me the NYPD officer, Department of Corrections officer, or New York State Police that's going to physically put Donald Trump in handcuffs. There are zero of them. Not one of them is going to do it because they know the ramifications to that would be massive. So I think that's another logic aspect of this that we need to pay attention to.
Especially since everybody knows Trump didn't do anything and Democrats wanted to get Trump. This is all about Democrats wanting to convict Trump. That's end of story. Okay? If Trump did to them what they did to him, every single publication would be, oh my God, he's an authoritarian, he's a tyrant, he's a despot. He didn't commit a crime. He doesn't have a laptop full of graft and bribery. That's Hunter and Joe. Or Joe. Maybe, you know what? Hunter is probably taking the fall for what Joe is doing. Why are they giving money to the Bidens? Because of Joe Biden. I mean, that's not an absurd leap of logic. It's called, Democrats used to call that honest graft. There's a book by a former Tammany Hall politician. I think it's the Plunkett of Tammany Hall. Talked about honest graft. You use your government position in a legal way, in a very surreptitious, shady, legal way. So you know that, the city is about to build on a certain piece of land, so you buy up the land. Then you sell it to the city for a much higher price because you know the city wanted that piece of land. That's called honest graft. And so when you do business with the Bidens or the Clintons, you know very well that government agencies aren't really going to investigate you because they would be then investigating the top government officials working with you. That's the allure of working with Democrats or even never Trump Republicans or whatever Republicans. Let's continue.
Let's sit down to Georgia, the Georgia election interference case. Is this thing dead too?
Well, of course, with state cases, the president doesn't have the right to pardon themselves or to have their attorney general essentially end those cases. But the Georgia case, again, has so many significant legal issues that are still up on appeal that even if Trump had lost, that case would still not be heading to trial anytime soon. So I think that the case still has a chance to be overturned essentially by the appellate courts. But even if it's not, it eventually will have significant problems getting reviewed by the Supreme Court anyway. So it won't proceed while he's in office. For all intents and purposes, it is also basically dead in the water.
I want you to write a headline for this entire segment. Is lawfare dead?
Well, I would hope so. I think that it spectacularly failed. And when we talk about lawfare, again, we're talking about the use of the legal system against a political opponent. Hypocritically, the Democrats have claimed Trump was going to be doing that. They've been doing that for years against him, and it blew up right in their faces.
Katie Cherkasky, great insight. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So she was 100% right. They've been doing that for years. It didn't work at all. The difference, though, is that did they break the law? Here's a question that you should ask when looking at this. And you can answer the question in the comments section in the live chat. Did Democrats break the law? Did Adam Schiff, did top DOJ or FBI officials, did Chuck Schumer, did Nancy Pelosi, did they break the law? Did state prosecutors break the law trying to twist and contort legal theory into this legal pretzel to try to get Trump? Did they withhold exculpatory evidence? Did they knowingly collude? Did state prosecutors work with the federal government? See, there's all these publications that claim to be morally superior, and they're the same publications who despise Trump, but the problem is that they knew they were lying. In fact, BuzzFeed published a dossier that was literally purchased by Clinton and the DNC, and underneath the title, it was, "These are unverified allegations." Well, then why on earth would you publish unverified allegations? And yet 4 years later, you have 50 intel officials lie about a verified laptop that the Federal Bureau of Investigation actually had. So Joe and Hunter's laptop was an actual thing. The Steele dossier was not. It was literally fantasy. Probably the fantasy of a top Democrat or Hollywood celebrity. And so they literally published news that was false. And then they were sued, and they got out of the defamation lawsuit or the libel lawsuit by saying, well, the government. And now BuzzFeed doesn't do news anymore, I don't believe. Neither does Vice. And now you're seeing MSNBC's viewership crater tank 38%. It's the same thing. People don't want high inflation. They don't want endless military conflicts. Trump is against both of those. They don't want weird ideological theories to dominate politics. Or like ideological theories that even Democrats really don't believe in, but they just gravitate towards for expediency. Anyway, let's continue.
Let's bring in our own legal eagle, if you don't mind me calling her that. Her name is Shannon Bream, and she's on the right-hand side of the screen. All right, Shannon, in your judgment, right now, does Gates get confirmed?
He's got an uphill battle when you have members of your own party saying, ooh, I got to think about this, or that's a shock, or you did.
Listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. She actually calls it.
Have Lindsey Graham, though, saying today, I voted for a lot of people I didn't like. So that leaves a lot of room open for where his vote may go. But listen, it's a tough vetting process to get through judiciary and get to the floor. And, you know, my first thought was yesterday when this was floated or announced by President-elect Trump, I thought, okay, he is putting Matt Gaetz out there, knowing he's got a really difficult road forward. Maybe he's got a different AG pick, and he says, okay, you were shocked by the Matt Gaetz pick. That didn't work. Here's who I'm really picking. Maybe somebody that would have been a little bit shocking had it been the first person he picked, but seems more palatable to Capitol Hill if Gaetz doesn't get through. But there are a lot of steps, and it's sparking this talk, too, from President-elect Trump. As you know, he asked all of the GOP Senate majority candidates to commit to this idea of recess appointments, and maybe that's exactly what he has in mind for Matt Gaetz.
Gaetz, if he becomes Attorney General, the belief is that he would go after the Justice Department.
So Shannon Bream called it. That was a brilliant move by Trump to just nominate Matt Gaetz, have the media, like fake the media out, and then you nominate Pam Bondi, who's fantastic. And then the media says, well, Pam Bondi's better, but then they realize, oh my God, she was a former attorney general for Florida. Oh no, she's actually more experienced than Matt Gaetz with the same mentality. No.
Wouldn't that be a form of retribution?
Yeah, that's exactly what President Trump's critics have said. They're worried about him going after enemies and using lawfare and doing the things he says have been done against him. And they see Matt Gaetz very much as the face of somebody who would do that. Now, the president-elect has said, success is going to be my revenge. I want everybody to do well. I want us to move forward. But he also has had very specific language about the DOJ, about the mistreatment he believes he's been subject to for years. And he wants somebody to clean out the DOJ. And so I think dropping the name Matt Gaetz yesterday sent shockwaves through the Justice Department and beyond here in D.C.
Well, it sure did. A ripple effect was extra. There was a tsunami of reaction to that. Next one, Shannon. Special counsel Jack Smith, he's asked an appeals court to halt his appeal against Donald Trump for the alleged mishandling of classified documents. Look, it's very complicated, but it seems to me that the lawfare against Trump is just falling apart completely.
Again, if you watch this channel, okay, I'm not right about everything, But compare my channel, almost 270,000 subscribers, hopefully on the way soon to 300,000. Compare my channel to like million to 4 million sub channels. Okay, especially like I'm conservative on most things. I've been supporting President Trump for 6-7 years now. But compare my channel to, I used to be the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. And the unofficial scribe of Sanders is the most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. How do you go from Bernie to Trump? Well, you don't want endless wars. And you want a better economy. If you care about that, it doesn't matter where you started off. You'd like Trump. Okay, and Bernie 2016 was a lot more conservative, especially on immigration, a lot of other things. But anyway, against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, all that stuff. But you look at all of these criminal cases, they were dropped because they didn't have anything on Trump. And that's what Trump is going to do to them. He's going to find out if people committed crimes going after him. See, the crime was not Trump, causing a rebellion. The crime was trying desperately to accuse him of something he didn't do. And Democrats knew this also. I remember speaking to a number of people, and I would say, look, he's not a Kremlin operative. Well, we don't know. We just have to investigate forever. And they knew it. They knew that he wasn't a Kremlin operative. Everyone did. You'd have to be a complete imbecile to think that he was installed by another country. They went with Clinton. Then they went with Biden, who's actually the worst of all three candidates. If you put Clinton, Biden, and Harris, it's Biden that is like the absolute worst of all three of them. But Biden's the one that was the most popular candidate of all time, and both of the other candidates lost. So nothing makes sense. Nothing makes sense at all. But again, Democrats live in a distorted, twisted world of plausible deniability. Well, that's just what happened. Well, but he won Ohio and Florida that night. Well, that could happen still.
Is it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think these federal cases, Jack Smith knows that they're sort of on a dead end at this point. So while yesterday, that Mar-a-Lago documents case, which is on appeal to the 11th Circuit, just that one step below the Supreme Court, while he didn't say we're ready to throw out the case, he did say, let's put this case on hold. It's pretty much the same thing he's done with the D.C. case, the January 6th federal case. And so it's very much a signaling that this is kind of the beginning of the end for those federal cases. They'll be winding down.
The last one for you, Shannon. The Republicans hold the House. That's the news. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says it's his fault. He takes responsibility. So, Shannon, what happens now?
Well, the Republicans have probably a very tiny majority, which has been, like herding cats, we say on Capitol Hill. It comes with its own headaches, but Republicans are relieved to be in charge, even if they know it's going to be a tight minority or majority. And of course, President Trump has selected some people he thinks are very talented, pulling them out of the House GOP. Those special elections will have to happen. So it gives an even tighter margin for Speaker Johnson, who's going to continue in that role. But interesting that, the top Democrat in the House, Congressman Jeffries, is saying, I own this, and we've got some soul searching to do. We'll have one of those Democrats on Fox News Sunday this weekend. James Clyburn is going to join us to talk about where they go from here on that post-election autopsy. Yeah.
There is no post-election autopsy. Democrats have zero interest in changing, because they still have millions upon millions of people who despise Trump. They can fundraise off it. They can deceive people who want to be deceived. Although, if Elon Musk, I believe, will purchase MSNBC. And the revenues were something along the lines of $800 to $1 billion in revenue. And he purchased Twitter. It was $5 billion in revenue in 2021, and he purchased it for over $40 billion. So if you just go if you just if the valuation, obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's pure speculation. But if the valuation is 8 times revenue, okay, just guessing here, I have zero knowledge, and but if it's 8 times revenue, it could be $8 billion, or yeah, I mean, if they make $1 billion, or 6 to 8 billion, if it's like let's say it's 800 million. That's MSNBC. But they're losing money. I mean, they're losing viewership. They're being spun off by Comcast and NBC Universal. So obviously they're being spun off because they're not very profitable. But again, why would you watch MSNBC when you could watch CNN, or when you can read the New York Times, or when you could read the Washington Post, the Atlantic, Mother Jones, The Nation, Vanity Fair, Esquire, Rolling Stone, 20 other publications and newspapers, 30 other around the country? They all say the same thing. I mean, what differentiates a Washington Post reader from the Atlantic or the New York Times? I mean, it's this. They're saying the same things all the time. I guess there are different parts of the newspaper. That's true. But what these publications are known for, their greatest voice, it's the same voice. Let's go ahead and continue. This is when they dismissed the classified data a while back, even before, right after the immunity victory.
Now we have major breaking news on one of the cases facing the former president, Donald Trump. Specifically, the documents case based out of Palm Beach, Florida. For more on that, David Spun tracking it in Washington, D.C. And David, I'll allow you to deliver this major headline.
Judge Eileen Cannon has dismissed the classified documents case against Donald Trump in Florida. This is massive news. We did not see this coming at all. This is a case that she tentatively postponed to a later date. The original trial was set for the end of May. She moved it back a couple of months, though not setting a date. She has just dismissed it in a 93-page court document saying that Jack Smith, the special counsel's appointment, violates the appropriations clause and the appointments clause of the United States Constitution. In layman's terms, she's saying that he was not appointed lawfully and not appointed appropriately. I'm sure we're going to be hearing from the Department of Justice about this momentarily, as Attorney General Merrick Garland believes that he had every right, and his team believes every right, that he could appoint Jack Smith as special counsel. We're going through this right now. It's 93 pages. The printer is cranking up behind me, page by page. But essentially, the bottom line here is that this documents case goes completely away for Donald Trump. There was a hearing that was originally scheduled for next week to talk more about this appointments issue. Judge Cannon issues this on the day of the beginning of the RNC. So right now, Donald Trump still has.
So according to reports, you know where it says top secret? So top secret information, those were actually folders that were placed, this is according to the reports that I read, folders that were placed by government officials. Trump didn't have those folders. Okay, Trump didn't have those folders that said top secret. This was a typical photo op when like media and the Democratic Party and loyalists in government merged. And this was at the height, really, in 2022 or 2023, the height of them trying desperately to just go after Trump, accuse him of everything under the sun, imprison him. We found out eventually that those were not, he didn't own those actual, the covers. It says top secret intel. No, he didn't. The specific agency put them there for the photo. And then everyone opined, oh my God, he was top secret intel, man. He had, even if he had that, he had the power to declassify as president. Biden and Clinton did not.
one pending case against him in federal court that's here in Washington, D.C. That's his alleged attempts to try to overturn the 2020 election. Special counsel Jack Smith received a blow to that case just a couple of weeks ago with the Supreme Court. That seems to be somewhat delayed right now. But this is big news. No question that this case is completely dismissed. Bill?
What's interesting is that, David, you said that's a 93-page ruling. I'm kind of curious as to why it would take so many pages, because if based on what you're saying is she's not ruling on the merits of the case. She's ruling that the special counsel should never have been appointed. And then I wonder about the how that will reverberate throughout the Department of Justice, because does that mean that other situations like this would also be dismissed?
It's a great question, and we're waiting to get some clarity from DOJ. I'm just reading here on page 2 of 93. It says the Appointments Clause sets as a default rule that all officers of the United States, whether inferior or principal, must be appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Jack Smith was not confirmed by the Senate. I assume Dana and Bill will hear an argument from DOJ that past special counsels, John Durham, Robert Mueller, just to name a few in recent memory, also were not confirmed in that way and were appointed and were allowed to continue their work. So that's what we're probably going to hear from DOJ. But a major coup and major win for former President Trump, who comes off this last weekend.
So he doesn't even really need a special counsel also. The DOJ can simply indict numerous individuals on breaking the law when going after Trump. Okay, it is against the law, especially the statute 18 U.S. Code 371. It is against the law to use a government position for personal or political gain, especially when setting up and framing Trump. Now, the rebuttal to that is, there's no evidence that anyone acted in such a manner. There's a plethora of evidence. There are text messages. There are text messages, but also there are lies, possible perjury. You had all President Obama's intel chiefs testify to Congress. Did they perjure themselves? Very likely. And we can go on forever. But again, if there was collusion in any way, that's also against the law. State and federal prosecutors can't team up to try to imprison Trump. And you can shred as many documents as you want. There's always a record. Anyway, hit subscribe. I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. God bless you. To my super chat, thank you. Thank you so very much, everybody. We're almost at 270, on our way to 300, and it's because of you. I appreciate all your support. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.